Sometimes the truth comes to us in the quietest ways, not in dramatic confrontations or sudden revelations, but in a folded piece of paper passed across a doctor's examination table by a woman you've only just met. My name is Emma. I'm 52 years old, a mother, a wife. Well, I was a wife. And for 2 years of my life, I was slowly disappearing. Not dying exactly, but fading. Becoming less and less myself with each passing month until I could barely recognize the confused, exhausted woman I saw in the mirror. Everyone told me it was stress, aging, hormones. Even I believed it eventually. That's what happens when the person you trust most in the world is the same person who's been poisoning you. This is the story of how one doctor's note saved my life. But more than that, it's the story of how I saved myself. How I took back my mind, my money, my daughter's future, and the woman I'd almost lost completely. If you've ever felt like you're going crazy, like your own body is betraying you, like the people around you see a different reality than you do, this story is for you. Because sometimes the fog lifts. Sometimes we find our way back. And sometimes justice comes not with thunder, but with patience, evidence, and the quiet strength of a woman who refuses to disappear. This is my story. 12 years ago, I married David Chen in a small ceremony in my parents' backyard. My mother cried happy tears. My father shook David's hand and told him he was getting a good woman. Everyone said we were perfect together. And for a long time, I believed we were. David was an accountant, organized, responsible, calm. After my first marriage fell apart when I was in my 20s, David felt like stability itself. He never yelled. He never forgot an anniversary. He managed our finances so I didn't have to worry about bills or taxes or retirement accounts. He said he was taking care of me, and I felt grateful. We had Sophie when I was 37, a miracle baby after years of trying. David was a devoted father. He coached her soccer team. He helped with homework. He made sure I had time to rest when Sophie was a colicky infant and I was drowning in exhaustion. I worked as a freelance graphic designer from home, building websites and logos for small businesses. It was flexible work, creative work. I loved it. David encouraged me to take it easy, not to stress myself with too many clients. "We don't need the money," he'd say. "Your health is more important." We lived in a 3-bedroom house in a quiet suburb of Portland, Oregon. We had a garden, a golden retriever named Biscuit, soccer games on Saturdays and movie nights on Fridays. From the outside, we looked like the American dream. But about 2 years ago, something started to change. Or maybe I started to change. It began with small things. I'd walk into a room and forget why I was there. I'd lose my keys 3 times in a week. I'd sit down to work on a client's logo and stare at my computer screen, unable to focus. The creative ideas that usually flowed so easily just gone. "You're tired," David would say gently, rubbing my shoulders. "You've been working too hard. Maybe you should take a break from new clients for a while." I thought he was being caring. I didn't realize he was building a narrative. The fatigue got worse. Some days I could barely get out of bed. I'd sleep 9, 10 hours and wake up feeling like I hadn't slept at all. My head felt full of cotton. My thoughts moved like honey, and slowly, quietly, I started to believe what David kept suggesting, that I was falling apart. By the time 18 months had passed, I had a whole catalog of symptoms that made no sense together. Dizziness that would come out of nowhere, making me grip the kitchen counter until the world stopped tilting. Memory gaps, hours I couldn't quite account for. Conversations I couldn't remember having. I'd find notes in my own handwriting that I had no recollection of writing. The brain fog was the worst. It felt like living underwater, like there was a thick pane of glass between me and the world. I'd read the same paragraph 5 times and still not absorb it. I'd start sentences and forget where they were going. Sophie would tell me something about school, and 10 minutes later, I'd have no memory of the conversation. "Mom, I already told you this," she'd say, frustrated. At 15, she was pulling away anyway, the way teenagers do. But I could see concern in her eyes, too. Worry that her mother was becoming, what? Unreliable? Confused? Old? I went to our family doctor, Dr. Patterson, a man David had found for us years ago. He ran basic blood work. everything came back normal. Probably perimenopause, he said with a patronizing smile. Women your age often experience these symptoms. Stress can exacerbate it. How are things at home? I told him things were fine. David was wonderful, supportive, patient with me even when I was at my worst. Dr. Patterson nodded like this confirmed something. Sometimes our bodies respond to stress we don't even realize we're carrying. I'm going to prescribe something mild for anxiety, and maybe consider seeing a therapist? These symptoms could be psychological. I took the prescription. I saw a therapist twice, but I felt like a fraud sitting there. What did I have to be anxious about? I had a good life, a good husband, a healthy daughter. The therapist suggested I might be depressed. Sometimes depression presents as cognitive issues, she said gently. So I added antidepressants to the growing collection of pills David organized for me each morning and night. And still, I got worse. The turning point came on a Thursday evening in late September. Sophie had the lead in her school's production of Our Town, and I'd been looking forward to it for weeks. David and I sat in the auditorium, watching her perform, and I felt such pride. My daughter, so confident and bright and wholly herself. But halfway through the second act, the dizziness hit me like a wave. The stage lights seemed to pulse and blur. My heart raced. I gripped David's arm. I don't feel well, I whispered. He looked concerned, solicitous. Do you need to step outside? I shook my head, not wanting to miss Sophie's performance. But during her final monologue, the beautiful, heartbreaking one where Emily realizes she can't go back, everything went dark at the edges of my vision. I must have swayed in my seat because David caught me. The next thing I clearly remember, I was in the lobby, sitting with my head between my knees while the school nurse took my blood pressure. Sophie stood nearby in her costume, makeup streaked with tears. Not stage tears, but real ones. She looked terrified. Mom, what's happening to you? She asked. You're scaring me. That night, after we got home and I'd convinced everyone I was fine, Sophie came to my bedroom. David had gone downstairs to give us some space. Mom, she said quietly, sitting on the edge of my bed. I think you should see a different doctor. Like someone who'll actually listen to you. Mrs. Chen's mom had symptoms like yours, and it turned out to be a thyroid thing, but she had to see 3 doctors before someone tested her properly. She pulled out her phone and showed me a website. Dr. Sarah Morrison. She's new in town, and she has really good reviews. People say she actually takes time with patients. She listens. I looked at my daughter, 15 years old and having to parent her own mother, and something shifted in me. A tiny spark of determination in all that fog. Okay, I said. I'll make an appointment. When I mentioned it to David later, he frowned. We have Dr. Patterson. Why do you need someone new? That seems unnecessary and probably expensive. You know how new doctors love to run tests. But for once, I didn't back down. Sophie's worried, I said. I'm worried. I just want a second opinion. He sighed like I was being difficult, but he didn't argue further. I called Dr. Morrison's office the next morning. Dr. Sarah Morrison's office was different from Dr. Patterson's sterile, impersonal space. There were plants on the windowsill, watercolor paintings of Oregon landscapes on the walls. The waiting room had comfortable chairs and actually current magazines. When Dr. Morrison called me back, I immediately noticed she was younger than I expected. Maybe 40, with dark hair pulled back in a practical ponytail and eyes that actually looked at you when she spoke. Emma, she said, shaking my hand with a firm, warm grip. I've read through the medical history you sent over. I want to hear everything in your own words. Not what Dr. Patterson wrote in his notes, but what you're experiencing. Take your time. So I told her. Everything. The fatigue, the brain fog, the memory issues, the dizziness. How I used to run my own business and now I could barely manage one client at a time. How I felt like I was losing myself piece by piece and nobody could tell me why. She listened without interrupting, taking notes. Then she asked questions. Detailed, specific questions. What medications are you currently taking? I listed them. The antidepressant, the anti-anxiety medication, some herbal supplements David had researched. Who prepares your medications? Do you take them directly from the bottles, or does someone portion them out for you? Strange question. My husband organizes them into a pill case for me, morning and evening doses. He's very careful about it. Make sure I don't forget. Something flickered across her face. And these supplements? Who suggested those? David. He's very into natural health. He makes me a special tea at night, too, to help me sleep. She made a note. When did these symptoms start? About 2 years ago, maybe a little less. And did anything significant happen around that time? Any major life changes? I thought. My mother passed away 18 months ago. She left me some money, an inheritance. Dr. Morrison's pen paused on the paper for just a second. Then she continued writing. She did a thorough physical exam, took blood for what she said was comprehensive metabolic testing, checked my blood pressure, heart rate, reflexes. And then, as she was finishing up, she did something that would change everything. She wrote something on her prescription pad, folded it, and handed it to me with a warm, professional smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. This is important, she said, her voice even. Read it when you're alone. I took the paper, confused, and tucked it into my purse. It wasn't until I was sitting in my car in the parking lot, David expecting me home in 30 minutes, that I unfolded it and read, Don't trust your husband. Don't tell him about this visit. Call me tonight. This number, phone number, after 9 p.m., Dr. Morrison. My hands started shaking. I sat in that parking lot for 20 minutes, reading and rereading those 2 sentences. Don't trust your husband. It was insane. It had to be a mistake. David was controlling, maybe, a little patronizing sometimes, but he loved me. He'd been nothing but patient through these 2 terrible years. He organized my medications because I kept forgetting. He managed our finances because I was too foggy to handle them. He was helping me, wasn't he? But Dr. Morrison was a medical professional. She'd risked her career writing this note. Doctors don't do things like this unless what? I thought about Sophie's terrified face at the school play. I thought about the pills David portioned out so carefully every morning and night. I thought about how he'd discouraged me from seeing a new doctor, how he always asked detailed questions about my appointments, how he seemed almost invested in my continuing decline. No, that was crazy thinking. The brain fog making me paranoid, but my hands wouldn't stop shaking. I finally started the car and drove home on autopilot, the note burning a hole in my purse. David's car was in the driveway. I sat for a moment, gathering myself, trying to arrange my face into something normal. Act normal, I thought. Whatever this is, act normal until you understand it. I walked into the house with the same confusion I'd been wearing for 18 months. So that part at least wasn't acting. How did it go? David called from the kitchen. I could smell something cooking. He'd started dinner. Fine, I said, hanging up my coat. She seems nice, wants to run some blood tests. I walked into the kitchen. David was chopping vegetables, an apron tied around his waist, the picture of domestic comfort. What kind of tests? He asked, not looking up from the cutting board. Just comprehensive ones, checking everything. His knife moved in precise, even strokes. Did you mention you're already on medication? Wouldn't want any interactions. Yes, I lied. I told her everything. He smiled at me then, warm and familiar. Good. I'm making your favorite, that Thai curry you love, and I'll make your tea after dinner. You look tired. I always look tired. Thank you, I said, and went upstairs before he could see my face. That evening was one of the strangest of my life. I sat at the dinner table with David and Sophie, eating curry, discussing Sophie's upcoming chemistry test and whether Biscuit needed his teeth cleaned. And the whole time I felt like I was watching us from outside my own body. I noticed things I'd never paid attention to before. The way David watched me eat, tracked whether I finished my plate. The way he immediately refilled my water glass whenever it was empty. Solicitous, caring, but also monitoring. How are you feeling, Em? He asked during dessert. You seem a little off. Just tired, I said, the same thing I'd been saying for 18 months. Well, you'll feel better after your tea and a good night's sleep. Sophie looked between us, something unreadable in her expression. When had she started watching David that way? Had she always, and I'd been too foggy to notice? After dinner, David made the tea he'd been making for me every night for months. Some special blend he ordered online, he'd said. Chamomile and valerian root and other herbs I couldn't identify. It smelled floral and slightly bitter. He handed me the mug with 2 cookies on a small plate. Here you go, sweetheart. This will help you sleep. I took it, wrapping my hands around the warm ceramic. Don't trust your husband. Thank you, I said. He kissed my forehead. I'm going to finish some work in the office. You should head to bed soon. You've had a long day. When he left the kitchen, I sat there looking at the tea. I'd drunk this tea hundreds of times. It made me drowsy and heavy, helped me fall into a deep, dreamless sleep. What if it was doing more than that? I waited until I heard his office door close. Then I quietly poured the tea down the sink, rinsed the mug, and placed it in the dishwasher. I ate the cookies. They were just cookies, I thought, and went upstairs. In the bathroom, I opened the pill organizer David had prepared for my evening medications. 7 small compartments, 1 for each day of the week, each containing 3 or 4 pills. I'd been taking these without question for over a year. I took out Saturday's evening pills, tomorrow's dose, and examined them. 2 white ones I recognized as my prescription medications, but there was also a small blue pill and a beige capsule I couldn't identify. I put them back carefully, exactly as they were. Then I went to bed, pretending to be drowsy, waiting for David to fall asleep so I could call the number on the note. David came to bed around 11, as he always did. He changed into his pajamas in the dark, trying not to disturb me. I kept my breathing slow and even, feigning the deep sleep the tea usually brought. He settled beside me, and I felt him watching me for a moment before he rolled over. I waited. 20 minutes. 30. His breathing deepened and evened out. Very slowly, I slipped out of bed. I grabbed my phone and my bathrobe and crept downstairs, avoiding the 3rd step that creaked, moving through our house like a stranger. Biscuit raised his head from his dog bed when I passed through the living room, but didn't bark. Good boy. Always such a good boy. I went out the front door as quietly as I could, closing it with barely a click. It was a cold October night, the kind where you can see your breath. I sat in my car in the driveway, doors locked, and with shaking hands, I dialed the number Dr. Morrison had written. She answered on the 2nd ring. Emma? Yes, I whispered, even though I was alone. I'm here. I'm in my car. I don't understand what's happening. I know this is frightening, she said, her voice calm and steady in the darkness. And I know what I did today was highly irregular. I could lose my license for this, but Emma, when I saw your blood work and heard your symptom description, and then you told me about your husband managing your medications. She paused. I could hear her choosing her words carefully. I need to ask you something, and I need you to think carefully before you answer. Has your husband been giving you any vitamins, supplements, or helping you manage your medications? Yes, I said. For about 18 months, since I started getting worse. Another pause. And you said your symptoms started around the time you received an inheritance? My mother died 18 months ago. She left me $340,000. I heard Dr. Morrison take a breath. Emma, your preliminary blood work shows some irregularities. I'm running more comprehensive tests, but what I'm seeing suggests chronic exposure to sedative medications, things that would cause exactly the symptoms you're describing. Brain fog, memory issues, fatigue, confusion. My throat went tight. Are you saying David that he's... I couldn't even say it. I'm saying, Dr. Morrison said carefully, that you should stop taking anything your husband gives you. Don't let him know you suspect anything. Act exactly as you have been, and come back to see me in 1 week. Why would he do this? My voice broke. Why would David want me confused and sick? I don't know. she said gently. But I've seen this before, and it's almost always about control. Money, power, sometimes all three. I sat in my cold car looking at my house, my beautiful, normal-looking house, and felt my entire reality cracking apart. What do I do? I asked. I was crying now, quietly, my breath fogging the windshield. First, you stay safe, Dr. Morrison said. Is there any chance he would physically hurt you if he knew you suspected? I thought about David, mild-mannered, calm David who never raised his voice. I don't think so. He's never been violent. Okay, but Emma, if he's been systematically drugging you for 18 months, he's capable of more than you think. So please be careful. The most important thing right now is that you act normal. Keep taking the pills, but don't actually take them. Palm them, hide them, flush them. Same with the tea. Pour it out when he's not looking. And then what? And then we see if your symptoms improve. If they do, if you start feeling clearer, more like yourself, that's going to tell us everything we need to know. But what do I do with that information? Go to the police? They'll think I'm crazy, confused. They'll probably talk to Dr. Patterson, and he'll show them all his notes about my anxiety and depression and… One step at a time, Dr. Morrison interrupted gently. First, we get you clear-headed. Then we document everything. Then we figure out next steps. You're not alone in this, Emma. I'm going to help you. I wiped my eyes. Why are you doing this? You could get in so much trouble. She was quiet for a moment. My aunt, she said finally. 30 years ago, before anyone talked about things like financial abuse or coercive control, her husband did something similar. Not drugging, but systematic isolation, gaslighting, convincing everyone, including my aunt, that she was losing her mind. By the time anyone realized what was happening, he'd drained her accounts and disappeared. She never really recovered. I'm sorry, I whispered. So am I. That's why I'm not going to let it happen to you. Now go back inside before David wakes up and notices you're gone. Call me if anything changes. Otherwise, I'll see you in my office next Tuesday. Okay, I said. Okay. Thank you, Dr. Morrison. Sarah, she said. Call me Sarah. And Emma, you're stronger than you know. You're going to get through this. I ended the call and sat for another moment, gathering my courage. Then I went back into my house, climbed the stairs in the dark, and slipped back into bed beside a man I no longer knew. The week that followed was the longest of my life. Every morning, David would hand me my pill organizer with coffee. I'd take the pills, put them in my mouth with a sip of water, and when he looked away to check his phone or read the paper, I'd palm them. Later in the bathroom, I'd flush them. The tea every night. I became an expert at pouring it down the sink while running water to mask the sound, or into the potted plant in the living room, which promptly died, I noticed with grim satisfaction. For the first 2 days, I felt no different. If anything, I felt worse. Anxious, paranoid, jumping at shadows. I started to wonder if Dr. Morrison was wrong, if I was making a terrible mistake distrusting David. But on the third day, I woke up and something was different. The fog was thinner. Not gone, but like the sun breaking through heavy clouds. I made coffee and realized I'd completed the thought I started. No mid-sentence blank spots, no forgetting what I was doing. By day 5, I felt like I'd surfaced from underwater. My mind was clearer than it had been in over a year. I could think in straight lines. I could remember the conversation I'd had with Sophie at breakfast. I could focus on a client's design project for more than 10 minutes at a time. The difference was undeniable, terrifying, and damning. David, of course, noticed. You seem better, he said at dinner on Friday, watching me across the table. More energetic. I've been feeling a little clearer, I said carefully. Maybe Dr. Morrison's tests will show what's been wrong. He frowned slightly. When do you get those results? Tuesday. I have a follow-up appointment. I could come with you, he offered. Moral support. My heart raced, but I kept my voice steady. That's sweet, but you hate taking time off work. I'll be fine. It's just a quick appointment. He looked like he wanted to argue, but Sophie interrupted with a question about whether she could go to a friend's house on Saturday, and the moment passed. That night, when I pretended to drink my tea and David went to his office, I texted Dr. Morrison. The fog is lifting. You were right. Her response came immediately. I'm so sorry, Emma, but now you know. Stay safe. See you Tuesday. I sat in my quiet kitchen, holding my phone, thinking about the man upstairs. The man I'd loved, trusted, built a life with. The father of my child. The man who'd been poisoning me. Why? The question burned in my chest. For money? For control? Just because he could? I needed answers, and I needed to be smart about getting them. Tuesday afternoon, I sat in Dr. Morrison's office, Sarah's office, I corrected myself, and listened as she explained exactly what she'd seen in my blood work. You had elevated levels of benzodiazepines and first-generation antihistamines, she said, showing me the lab report. Neither of which you were prescribed, both of which, when taken chronically in combination, cause exactly the symptoms you described. Benzodiazepines, I repeated. That's like Valium? Xanax? Yes, they're sedatives. In small doses, they treat anxiety. In regular doses over time, they cause cognitive impairment, memory problems, and physical dependence. The antihistamines, particularly the older ones like diphenhydramine, compound these effects. Together, they create a fog that makes it very hard to think clearly or form new memories. I felt sick. And they were in the pills David gave me? Or the tea? Most likely both. It would be easy to disguise in supplements or herbal teas. And because you trusted him to manage your medications, you had no way of knowing what you were actually taking. But why didn't Dr. Patterson catch this? He ran blood work too. Sarah's jaw tightened. He ran basic panels, not toxicology screening. And honestly, Emma, she paused, seeming to struggle with whether to say something. I shouldn't tell you this, but there are some notes in your transferred medical records that concern me. Dr. Patterson documented your symptoms as psychiatric in nature. He wrote that you seemed anxious about your cognitive decline and possibly hypochondriacal. He recommended continued antidepressants and suggested your husband was very supportive and concerned. The room spun. He was working with David? I don't know, but the narrative in your medical file supports a picture of a mentally unstable woman whose loving husband is trying to help her. If David ever wanted to, if he had plans that required you to be seen as incompetent. She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't need to. Why did you risk your career for me? I asked. You could have just run the tests, told me the results professionally. Let me figure it out on my own. Sarah leaned forward, her eyes serious. Because I took an oath to do no harm. And letting you walk out of here, still being poisoned, still trusting the person harming you? That would have been harm. Active harm. Whatever professional consequences I face, I can live with them. I couldn't have lived with staying silent. I don't want to believe this, I said, my voice breaking. He's Sophie's father. We've been together for 12 years. If he wanted to leave me, he could just leave. Why would he do this? Sarah's expression was compassionate but firm. Emma, I can't tell you his motivations, but I can tell you that in the cases I've seen, and unfortunately I've seen several, this kind of systematic drugging is usually connected to financial control. You mentioned a significant inheritance? $340,000. From my mother. Where is that money now? I realized I didn't know. David had helped me deposit it into our joint account, said he'd make sure it was properly invested. That was a year and a half ago, right when the symptoms started. I don't know, I admitted. David handles our finances. He always has. It was just easier to let him because he encouraged you to let him, Sarah said gently. Emma, I know this is hard to hear, but isolation and financial control are classic tactics. Did he ever discourage you from working? I thought about all those conversations. You're working too hard. You need to rest. We don't need the money. Focus on your health. Present it as care, as love. He wanted me to quit taking clients, I said slowly. Said it was too stressful for me. And I did, mostly. I went from 15 clients to 3 over the last year. making you financially dependent on him. But we're married, community property. What's his is mine, only if you're competent to claim it. Emma, do you have any idea what your current financial situation is? Bank accounts, retirement funds, debts? I didn't. I realized with creeping horror that I had no idea. I'd let David handle everything because I was too foggy to manage it, because he told me not to worry, because I trusted him. I need to find out, I said. I need to know what he's done. Sarah nodded, but carefully. If he realizes you're investigating, I'll be careful, I promised. I'm getting good at pretending. Sarah pulled out a fresh notepad. Here's what we're going to do. First, these blood tests confirm you were being drugged. I'm documenting everything in your medical file, separate from anything transferred from Dr. Patterson. Second, I want you to come back in 2 weeks for another test. We'll be able to show the progression as the substances leave your system. Won't that look suspicious? Too many appointments? Tell David I'm concerned about thyroid issues and want to monitor your levels. It's believable, common for women your age, and gives us a medical reason to see each other regularly. I nodded, feeling steadier now that we had a plan. Third, Sarah continued, you need to start documenting everything. Keep a journal, date and time stamped, of how you feel, what David gives you, anything unusual. Take photos of your pill bottles and tea packages. If you can safely get samples of the pills or tea without him noticing, do it. For what? The police? Possibly. But first, I think you should talk to a lawyer. Don't tell David, just consultation. Find out what your legal rights are, how to protect yourself financially, what evidence you'd need for divorce proceedings or criminal charges. Divorce, criminal charges, the words felt surreal. And Emma, most important, stay safe. If at any point you feel threatened, if David becomes suspicious or aggressive, you leave. You take Sophie and you go somewhere he can't find you. Do you have somewhere you could go? I thought of my best friend Rachel. Yes. Good. Keep your phone charged. Keep your car keys accessible. Have a bag packed where he won't find it. Just essentials. Cash if you can manage it without him noticing. You think he's dangerous? Sarah met my eyes. I think someone who's been systematically poisoning you for 18 months is capable of anything. I woke up Wednesday morning with perfect clarity for the first time in over a year, and it was terrifying. David was already awake, moving quietly around the bedroom, getting ready for work. I watched him through barely open eyes, this man I'd shared a bed with for 12 years, and tried to reconcile him with what I now knew. He looked the same. Salt and pepper hair, neatly trimmed, wire-rimmed glasses. The slight paunch he complained about but never quite exercised away. He moved with his usual careful precision, laying out his work clothes, checking his phone. Ordinary. Completely ordinary. How could someone so ordinary be capable of such calculated cruelty? He noticed I was awake and smiled, the same smile I'd woken up to for over a decade. Good morning, sweetheart. How did you sleep? Fine, I said, keeping my voice slightly thick, still playing the part of the foggy, compliant wife. Tired, though. You should rest today. Don't push yourself. He kissed my forehead. I had to force myself not to flinch and headed downstairs. I lay there for a long moment after he left, then got up and went to the bathroom. The pill organizer sat on the counter where it always did. I looked at Wednesday's morning dose. 3 pills, 2 white and 1 pink. I took them out, examined them in the clear light of day, photographed them with my phone, put them back, went through my usual morning routine. When I went downstairs, David had breakfast ready. Toast, eggs, fresh fruit, coffee already poured, exactly how I liked it. Thank you, I said, sitting down. Of course. He sat across from me with his own coffee, scrolling through news on his tablet. What are you up to today? Not much. Maybe some work on the Henderson logo? Sophie has soccer practice after school. Don't forget your vitamins, he said, nodding toward the pill organizer he'd placed next to my plate. I picked it up, popped open Wednesday's morning compartment, put the pills in my mouth, took a sip of coffee, swallowed. David glanced up, saw me take them, and went back to his reading. I kept the pills under my tongue until he looked away, then spit them into my napkin while pretending to wipe my mouth. Later in the bathroom, I added them to the growing collection I'd started keeping in a plastic bag hidden inside a box of tampons. Somewhere David would never look. Evidence. Over the next few days, I became an expert in deception. The pills were easy. I'd perfected the fake swallow, the quick palm, the casually covering my mouth while I discreetly removed them. David watched me take them, but he didn't watch closely enough. He trusted that I was still the confused, compliant Emma who wouldn't question his care. The tea was trickier. He made it himself every evening, brought it to me while I sat reading or watching TV, sometimes stayed in the room while I drank it. I learned to take small sips, wait until he was distracted, and pour it into whatever was handy. A plant, the kitchen sink when I went to rinse the mug, once even into Biscuit's water bowl when David left the room. I felt guilty and immediately dumped it out and refilled it with fresh water before the dog could drink it. Sometimes I just held the warm mug, pretending to sip until David went to bed. Then I'd pour it out. "Your tea's getting cold," he'd say sometimes, noticing. "I'm savoring it," I'd reply. "It's so relaxing." He seemed pleased by this. "I'm glad it helps you. You seem a little better this week. More alert." My heart would race, but I'd keep my voice casual. "Do I? Maybe the new doctor's tests will explain why." "Maybe," he'd say, but something would flicker in his eyes. Concern? Calculation? I couldn't tell anymore. Sophie noticed the change too. "Mom, you seem more like yourself," she said one afternoon, hugging me in the kitchen. "I'm so glad. I've been so worried." I held her tight, breathing in her shampoo, fighting tears. How much had she noticed over the past year and a half? How much had she been scared by, confused by, unable to name? "I'm feeling better," I told her. "Dr. Morrison is really helping." "Good. I like her. She actually listens to you." Sophie pulled back, studying my face. "Dad said you should stick with Dr. Patterson, but I think Dr. Morrison is better." "Did Dad say that?" I asked carefully. "Yeah. He said new doctors sometimes overcomplicate things, but I think he's wrong." "Me too, baby," I said. "Me too." By the end of the first week of not taking the drugs, I felt like I'd woken from a long gray dream. The fog, that thick, suffocating fog that had wrapped around my thoughts for 18 months, was simply gone. I could think in straight lines. I could read a page and remember what I'd read. I could have a conversation and recall it an hour later. It was like getting a part of myself back that I'd forgotten I'd lost. I worked on the Henderson logo and finished it in 3 hours. Work that would have taken me 3 days a month ago. The creative flow was back. The ability to see colors and shapes and patterns in my mind and translate them onto screen. I'd missed it so much I almost cried. Mrs. Henderson loved the final design. "Emma, this is exactly what I wanted. You're so talented. I'm going to recommend you to everyone I know." I accepted the compliment, basking in it. When had I last felt competent? Skilled? Like myself? But with the clarity came anger. A deep, burning anger that grew stronger every day. David had done this to me. Deliberately. Methodically. For 18 months, he'd watched me struggle, seen me scared and confused and doubting myself, and he'd handed me more pills, more tea, more poison while telling me it was for my own good. He'd stolen a year and a half of my life. My confidence, my work, my daughter's trust in her mother's stability. For what? Money? That was the most likely answer, but I still didn't have proof. I needed to access our financial accounts. I needed to see what David had been doing while I was too foggy to pay attention. But David handled all the finances online, and I didn't have any of the passwords. Years ago, I'd let him set up our accounts, and then, busy with Sophie, with my work, with life, I just never bothered to learn them. "You don't need to worry about it," he'd always said. "I've got it covered." And I'd been grateful. Back then, it seemed like he was taking care of boring adult tasks so I didn't have to. Now I understood it was control, isolation, making sure I had no independent access to information about our money. Our money. My mother's inheritance, my freelance income, our joint savings. Where was it all? What had he done with it? I waited until David was at work and Sophie was at school. Then I went to his home office, a room I'd barely entered in 2 years because David said he needed it organized his way, and I would just mess things up if I moved anything. The door was locked. When had he started locking his office? I stood there, hand on the doorknob, feeling that anger burn hotter. Oh, David, I thought. What are you hiding? The locked office was a problem, but not an insurmountable one. I searched the house methodically, looking for spare keys. David was organized to the point of obsession. Everything had its place. He wouldn't keep a key somewhere random. I found it in his dresser, in a small wooden box where he kept his watch collection and cufflinks. A single small key on a plain ring. My hands trembled as I unlocked his office door. The room was exactly as I remembered. Neat to the point of sterility. Desk clear except for his computer and a lamp. Filing cabinets labeled with color-coded tabs. Bookshelves organized by topic. I started with the filing cabinets. Insurance documents, tax returns, mortgage papers. All perfectly organized, all seemingly normal. Then I booted up his computer. Password protected, of course. I tried a few obvious combinations. Our anniversary, Sophie's birthday, his birthday. None worked. I'd need help with this. Someone who knew about computers. But while I was there, I kept searching. In the bottom drawer of his desk, I found a folder that wasn't labeled like the others. Inside were printouts of emails, correspondence with someone named Jeremy Carlson, attorney at law. My stomach dropped as I read the subject lines. Written competency proceedings, initial consultation. Retail medical documentation requirements. Conservatorship application timeline. I pulled out the most recent email, dated 3 weeks ago, and read, David, based on our last conversation and the medical records from Dr. Patterson you've provided, we have a strong foundation for proceeding with a competency evaluation. The documented cognitive decline over 18 months, combined with your statements about her inability to manage daily tasks and finances, should be sufficient for a court-appointed evaluation. Once the evaluation is complete and assuming it supports incompetency, you would be appointed as her conservator, giving you legal control over all financial decisions. This would protect the marital assets, including the inheritance, from any poor judgment on her part. Timeline: 2 to 3 months from filing to resolution. Let me know when you'd like to proceed. I read it 3 times, my hands shaking so badly I could barely hold the paper. He was going to have me declared incompetent. He was going to take legal control of everything. My inheritance, our accounts, my entire financial life. And I would have no say, no access, no ability to stop him, because a court would have ruled that I wasn't capable of managing my own affairs. And it would have worked. 3 weeks ago, I was so foggy I could barely remember to eat lunch. Any evaluation would have found me incapable. Dr. Patterson's records would have supported it. David's careful, concerned husband act would have sealed it. If Dr. Morrison hadn't given me that note, I would be under conservatorship right now, with David controlling every penny while I continued to deteriorate. I photographed every page in that folder with my phone, hands trembling, ears straining for the sound of David's car in the driveway. Then I put everything back exactly as I'd found it, locked the office, and replaced the key. I made it to the bathroom just in time to throw up. That night, after David went to sleep, I lay in the dark with my phone under the covers, finally doing what I should have done months, years ago. I logged into our bank's website. I still had the login information on my phone from years ago, saved back when I actually paid attention to our accounts. I held my breath, half expecting David to have changed the password and locked me out entirely. But he hadn't. The login worked. Maybe he'd gotten so confident in my fog, so sure I would never think to check, that he'd become careless. The main page loaded, showing our accounts. I clicked on our primary joint checking account, the one where my freelance payments got deposited, where David's paycheck went, where we paid our mortgage and bills. The balance was $3,847. I stared at that number, confused. We should have had more than that. Much more. David made good money as an accountant. I'd been bringing in at least some income even during my worst months. Our expenses were normal. Mortgage, utilities, groceries, Sophie's activities. Where was everything else? I clicked through the transaction history, scrolling back through months of activity. And there, repeating every few weeks, I found them. Transfers. Large transfers, ranging from $5,000 to $15,000, moving money from our joint account to an account I didn't recognize. The account number meant nothing to me. I went back further. The transfers had started 18 months ago, right after my mother's inheritance was deposited. At first, they were smaller, maybe $3,000 or $4,000. Then they grew larger and more frequent. I added them up in my phone's calculator, my hands shaking. Over the past 18 months, David had transferred $287,000 from our joint account to this mysterious other account. $287,000. Almost all of my mother's inheritance, plus a good portion of our regular savings. I checked our other joint accounts. Savings, money market. They'd been similarly drained. The savings account that had held $40,000 2 years ago now had $1,200. The money market was empty. But here's what made my blood run cold. Every transfer was labeled investment DChen personal portfolio, or retirement planning transfer, or long-term savings. He'd made it look legitimate, like he was being responsible, planning for our future. Except I had no access to wherever that money had gone. I tried clicking on the account number to see if it would show me details, but it just showed as an external account at a different bank. I'd need the actual bank name and login information to see it. Information I didn't have. David had taken my inheritance, my mother's final gift to me, and moved it somewhere I couldn't touch it, couldn't see it, couldn't even verify it still existed, while keeping me too drugged to notice or care. I couldn't sleep. At 2 a.m., I crept downstairs with my laptop and went to one of the free credit report websites. I'd checked my credit maybe once in the last 5 years, and that was only because our mortgage lender required it when we refinanced. David had handled that too, brought me the papers to sign, told me everything looked good. I entered my information and requested the report. What appeared on my screen made me feel physically sick. 7 credit cards I didn't recognize, all opened within the past 18 months, all in my name. Chase, $8,400 balance. Capital One, $12,200 balance. Discover, $6,800 balance. American Express, $15,600 balance. Citi, $9,200 balance. Bank of America, $11,100 balance. Synchrony, $4,900 balance. Total debt, $68,200. $68,000 in credit card debt that I had never incurred, on cards I'd never applied for, making purchases I'd never made. I clicked through to see the detailed transactions on one of the cards. The charges were all over the place. Online purchases, restaurants I'd never been to, cash advances, transfers. I checked another card. Same story. Random purchases, many of them cash withdrawals. David had been using my identity to take out credit cards and rack up debt. Probably to supplement the money he was draining from our accounts. Or maybe just because he could. The brain fog would have made it easy. If credit cards arrived in the mail, he could have intercepted them. If I'd seen charges on statements, I wouldn't have been clear-headed enough to question them effectively. And here was the truly clever part. All the debt was in my name only. His credit was clean. If we divorced, I'd be responsible for all of it. If he succeeded in having me declared incompetent, he'd be my conservator. He could file bankruptcy in my name if needed, or just let the debt sit there, ruining my credit while he walked away with the cash he'd extracted. I took screenshots of everything. Every card, every balance, every transaction history I could access. Then I went to the bathroom and threw up again, as quietly as I could, so I wouldn't wake David. My husband, the man I'd trusted, loved, built a life with, had been systematically destroying me. Financially, mentally, legally, and he'd almost gotten away with it. I sat on the bathroom floor, my head against the cool tile, and thought about my mother. She died of cancer 18 months ago. A brutal 6-month decline that I'd helped her through, driving her to treatments, staying overnight when she was too weak to be alone, holding her hand while she cried about all the things she wouldn't get to see. Sophie's graduation. My future. A cure. Take care of yourself, Emma, she'd said near the end, her hand thin and papery in mine. Promise me. You're always taking care of everyone else. Take care of yourself, too. I promise, Mom. The money I'm leaving you, it's not much, but it's everything I had. Use it for something good. Something that makes you happy. Take that trip to Italy you always talked about, or start your own design firm, or just give yourself some breathing room, some freedom. Promise me you won't just let it sit there. I promise. She'd died 3 days later, and I'd cried for weeks. David had been so supportive, so patient. He'd handled all the funeral arrangements while I was too grief-stricken to function. He'd dealt with the estate paperwork. He'd helped me deposit the inheritance check, $340,000. Everything my mother had saved and invested over her lifetime, into our joint account for safekeeping. We'll figure out the best way to invest it, he'd said, hugging me while I cried. We'll make sure it grows. Your mother would want it to be handled wisely. I trusted him. Of course I'd trusted him. He was my husband. He was good with money. He cared about our future. Except none of that was true. Within weeks of my mother's death, the drugging had started. Within months, he was draining the account. Within a year, he was consulting lawyers about having me declared incompetent so he could legally control everything. My mother had left me that money to give me freedom. And David had used it to buy my cage. I cried there on the bathroom floor, grieving my mother all over again, and grieving the marriage I'd thought I had. The next morning, I called Rachel. Rachel Nguyen had been my best friend since college. She was a physical therapist, divorced, mother of 2, and the kind of person who would help you hide a body if you called at 2 a.m. and said you needed her. Can you come over? I asked. David's at work. I need help. She was there in 20 minutes. I showed her everything. The medical records from Dr. Morrison, the photos of the pills I'd been palming, the bank statements, the credit cards, the emails about conservatorship. She read it all in silence, her expression growing darker with each page. That fucking bastard, she finally said. Emma, this is criminal. This isn't just divorce-worthy, this is press charges-worthy. I know, but I need to be smart about this. If I just confront him, if I go to the police without enough evidence, he'll say you're crazy, paranoid, that you're having some kind of breakdown. Rachel understood immediately. The fog you've been in, he'll use that against you. Exactly. Dr. Patterson's records support his version. David's been building this narrative for 18 months. Everyone thinks he's the devoted husband caring for his declining wife. Rachel was quiet for a moment, thinking. Then, my brother, Marcus. He's a lawyer. He specializes in financial exploitation and elder abuse. I know you're not elderly, but this is the same pattern. He's seen this before. Can I trust him? With your life. He's handled cases like this. He'll know exactly what evidence you need, how to protect yourself legally, how to make sure David can't hurt you or Sophie. She grabbed my hands. Emma, you're not alone in this. You're going to get through it. And David is going to pay for what he's done. I let myself believe her. I had to. That evening, after David left for his weekly poker game with colleagues, I asked Sophie if we could talk. She looked up from her homework, immediately wary. Is everything okay? Come sit with me, I said, patting the couch beside me. She came, tucking her legs under her, studying my face. Mom, you're scaring me. You look really serious. I need to ask you some questions, and I need you to be completely honest with me. Can you do that? Okay. I took a breath. Over the past year and a half, have you noticed anything strange about Dad's behavior? Especially regarding me? Sophie bit her lip, and I could see the conflict on her face, loyalty to her father warring with something else. You can tell me, I said gently. Whatever it is, I need to know. He's just been Really weird about you, she said finally. Like, obsessed with making sure you take your pills? And he's always asking me if you seemed confused or if you did anything strange. He made me keep a journal once, writing down times when you forgot things or seemed out of it. My heart sank. He asked you to document my symptoms? Yeah. He said it was to help the doctors understand what was happening. But it felt weird. Like he wanted me to focus on all the bad stuff and ignore when you were doing okay. She looked down at her hands. And he told me not to tell you about the journal. Said it would make you feel bad about yourself. Where is this journal now? I stopped doing it after a couple months. It felt like tattling on you. I hid it in my room. She looked up, tears in her eyes. Mom, what's going on? You've seemed so much better the last couple weeks. More like yourself. But Dad seems almost, I don't know, disappointed? Like he wanted you to stay sick? I pulled her into a hug, fighting my own tears. Baby, I need to tell you something, and it's going to be hard to hear. But I need you to know the truth. I told her everything, age appropriately, carefully, but honestly. The note from Dr. Morrison. The drugs I'd been taking without knowing what they really were. The financial manipulation. The conservatorship plan. Sophie listened, her face cycling through disbelief, horror, and finally anger. He was poisoning you? She whispered. Dad was on purpose? Yes. To steal Grandma's money? Yes. She started crying then, hard, shaking sobs. I knew something was wrong. I kept telling myself I was imagining it, that Dad loved us, that he'd never. But I knew. Part of me knew. This is not your fault, I said firmly, holding her. None of this is your fault. You're 16. You shouldn't have had to see this or suspect this or carry this. What are we going to do? We're going to be smart, I said. We're going to gather evidence, protect ourselves, and make sure he can't hurt us anymore. But Sophie, I need you to be brave. I need you to act normal around Dad while we prepare. Can you do that? She pulled back, wiping her eyes, and I saw a fierceness in her expression that reminded me of my mother. I can do that, she said. And Mom? I'm glad you're fighting back. Grandma would be proud of you. Rachel came back 2 days later with her brother Marcus, and we sat at my kitchen table going through everything while David was at work and Sophie was at school. Marcus Nguyen was in his early 40s, sharp-eyed and serious, with the kind of calm competence that made you feel immediately safer. He listened to my story without interrupting, taking notes in a leather-bound journal. When I finished, he sat back and exhaled slowly. Okay, he said. First thing, what David has done is criminal on multiple levels. We're talking financial exploitation, fraud, potentially poisoning, or assault with the drugging, identity theft with the credit cards. This is serious. Can we prove it? I asked. The medical evidence from Dr. Morrison is strong. The emails about conservatorship show intent. The financial records show systematic theft. The credit cards are documented fraud. He tapped his pen against his journal. But here's what concerns me. David's been building his counter-narrative for 18 months. He has Dr. Patterson's records. He probably has documentation of your confusion, your forgetfulness. He's positioned himself as the devoted husband. So what do I do? We build an airtight case before we make any moves. The moment you confront David, or he realizes you're lucid and investigating, he'll go into damage control mode. We need everything locked down first. Rachel leaned forward. What does that look like? First, Emma needs to secure her own finances. Open a new bank account at a different bank, just in her name. Start redirecting any income there. We'll need to document all the transfers from the joint account. Get copies of everything, statements going back at least 2 years. I nodded, taking notes. Second, we gather all the medical evidence. Dr. Morrison's documentation is crucial, but we need the actual pills David's been giving you. Can you get me samples? I have about 2 weeks' worth saved. Perfect. We'll have them independently tested. Third, we document everything going forward. Every conversation with David, every weird behavior, Every time he gives you pills or tea. Audio recordings if you can do it safely. Oregon is a one-party consent state, so that's legal. And then what? I asked. Then we decide whether to go to the police first or divorce court. But Emma, I want to be clear. The moment David knows you're onto him, this could get dangerous. You need a safety plan. Somewhere you and Sophie can go immediately if needed. She can stay with me, Rachel said immediately. Both of them. As long as they need. I looked at my best friend, this woman who'd been telling me for 2 years that something about David seemed off, that I should see another doctor, that I deserved better. You knew, I said. Didn't you? You sensed something wrong? Rachel's eyes filled with tears. I knew he was controlling. I didn't know he was... I never imagined this. But yeah, I never liked how he managed every aspect of your life. How he discouraged you from working. How he always had an answer for why you were struggling. She grabbed my hand. I should have pushed harder. I should have... You couldn't have known. I didn't even know. I squeezed her hand. But you're helping me now. That's what matters. The next Tuesday, I returned to Dr. Morrison's office for my follow-up appointment. The blood work was dramatic. The benzodiazepines were nearly undetectable now, just trace amounts as my body metabolized what had built up over 18 months. The antihistamines were gone. My liver function, which had been stressed before, was normalizing. This is remarkable, Sarah said, showing me the comparison charts. Emma, you understand what this proves, right? You weren't sick, you weren't declining. You were being systematically poisoned, and your body is recovering beautifully now that you've stopped the exposure. I stared at the numbers, these clinical, indisputable facts. Will you testify to this, if it comes to that? Absolutely. I've already consulted with our hospital's legal team. What I did, giving you that note, was ethically complicated but legally defensible under duty to warn. The medical evidence I've gathered is solid. Any court will see this clearly. David is going to say I'm making it up, that I'm confused, paranoid, that the medications I was taking were prescribed and necessary. Then we show that the medications in your blood weren't the ones prescribed. We show the dramatic improvement once exposure stopped. We show my contemporaneous notes from your first appointment, before you knew what was happening. This isn't he said, she said, Emma. This is documented medical fact. She handed me a file folder. I've prepared a complete medical summary, all your lab work, my clinical notes, my professional assessment. Keep this somewhere safe. Make copies. Your lawyer will need it. I took the folder like it was made of gold. How are you holding up? Sarah asked, her voice gentle now. Not medically. Emotionally. I'm angry, I admitted, and scared, and grieving the marriage I thought I had. But I'm also clear-headed for the first time in so long, and that's everything. I can think, I can plan, I can protect my daughter. I couldn't do any of that a month ago. That's not nothing, Sarah said. Emma, you're one of the strongest people I've met. What you're doing, investigating while pretending, gathering evidence while maintaining your cover, that takes incredible courage. Or incredible anger, I said wryly. Often the same thing, she replied with a small smile. Anger can be fuel. Use it. Marcus worked fast. Within a week, he'd filed paperwork to freeze the joint accounts and had begun the process of tracing where David had moved the money. I found the account, he told me over the phone. It's at Wells Fargo, solely in David's name. Your inheritance is sitting there along with about $60,000 from your joint savings. He hasn't spent it, probably was waiting until the conservatorship was finalized so he could access it legally as your guardian. Can we get it back? Once we file, yes. It's marital property, and it can be proven that it was moved without your knowledge or consent while you were incapacitated. But Emma, there's something else. My stomach tightened. What? I found a second account. This one's newer, opened just 3 months ago. It has $47,000 in it. Where did that come from? Best I can trace, it's from those credit cards he opened in your name. He was taking cash advances, depositing them in this account, essentially stealing from you using your own credit. The audacity of it was breathtaking. I'm also looking into Dr. Patterson, Marcus continued. If he was actively falsifying medical records to support David's conservatorship plan, that's medical fraud and conspiracy. He could lose his license. Good, I said coldly. He should. We're building a solid case, but Emma, I need to ask. How long can you keep up the act at home? This is taking a toll on you. I thought about it. Living with David, pretending I didn't know. Pretending to be foggy when I was thinking more clearly than I had in years. Acting like the wife he thought he'd successfully subdued. As long as it takes, I said. I'm not letting him win. Not after everything he's done. Okay, then let's make sure when we strike hard enough that he can't get back up. Marcus had given me clear instructions. Make him think his plan is working. Make him confident. Overconfident people make mistakes. So I became an actress in my own life. I started forgetting things again. On purpose. Did I tell you about Sophie's parent-teacher conference? I'd asked David when I'd just told him the day before. I can't remember if I mentioned it. His face would light up with concern. You told me yesterday, honey. Are you feeling foggy again? I am, I'd say, touching my forehead. It's been a hard week. Maybe I should make an appointment with Dr. Patterson? Let's see how you feel, he'd say smoothly. Dr. Morrison's tests might reveal something. Give it a little time. I'd leave my keys in strange places, put the milk in the pantry instead of the fridge, stare blankly at my computer screen when David came to check on me, as if I'd lost my train of thought mid-sentence. And here was the terrible thing. It was easy to fake because I remembered how it felt. The real confusion, the real fog. I just had to play act something I genuinely experienced for 18 months. David ate it up. I could see the satisfaction in his eyes when I seemed confused. The relief when I appeared to be declining again. He started mentioning the conservatorship more openly. I was reading about medical power of attorney, he said one night over dinner. Just in case things get worse. It might be good to have legal protections in place. What do you mean? I asked, making my voice uncertain. Well, if you couldn't make decisions for yourself, I could make them for you. Medical decisions, financial decisions. It would protect you. Protect me. The gall of it. That sounds scary, I said. Like giving up control. Not giving up, he said gently, reaching across the table to take my hand. Just sharing it with someone who can help. Someone who loves you and wants what's best for you. I let my eyes fill with tears. I don't want to lose myself. You won't, he said. I promise. I'll take care of everything. Yeah, I thought. That's exactly what I'm afraid of. But out loud, I just said, okay, if you think it's best. His smile was triumphant. While I played the declining wife, I was documenting everything. I bought a small digital recorder, the kind students use for lectures, and started recording our conversations. Oregon's one-party consent law meant I only needed my own permission, and I gave it enthusiastically. I captured David suggesting I needed more help. David talking about how maybe I should stop driving because I seemed out of it. David gently, lovingly undermining my competence at every turn. I also started recording his nightly ritual of preparing my pills and tea. Here's your evening medication, sweetheart, he'd say, voice warm and caring. What's in these again? I'd ask, playing confused. Just what Dr. Patterson prescribed. Your antidepressant, diet, the anti-anxiety medication, and some supplements to help you sleep. Same as always. Except it wasn't what Dr. Patterson prescribed. The samples I'd saved had been tested by an independent lab Marcus hired. Results: lorazepam, a benzodiazepine not prescribed to me, diphenhydramine, an old antihistamine not prescribed to me, and yes, also my actual prescribed antidepressant, probably to maintain plausible deniability if I ever questioned the pills. The tea was harder to test because I'd poured it all out, but Marcus suggested we set up a small hidden camera in the kitchen. Just capture him making it, Marcus said. We don't need to know exactly what's in it if we can show he's making you a special preparation that he doesn't drink himself. So I set up my old laptop on a kitchen shelf, angled just right, running video recording software. It looked like it was just sitting there charging. David never questioned it. The footage was damning. David carefully preparing the tea, adding something from an unmarked container he kept in a high cabinet I couldn't reach. Stirring it thoughtfully, bringing it to me with a smile. "Your special tea, honey. This will help you relax." I photographed everything else I could. The pill bottles in his locked office, the real ones with labels for prescriptions in my name that I'd never authorized. The emails on his computer when I finally managed to guess his password. It was Sophie's birthday backwards. Should have tried that first. The bank statements showing the systematic transfers. I kept a detailed journal, time-stamped and dated, of every day. How I felt when I didn't take the pills. How David reacted to my improvement or decline. Every conversation about my competence. Every suggestion that I needed more help. Marcus was impressed when I showed him everything. "This is incredibly thorough," he said. "Emma, with this evidence, combined with Dr. Morrison's medical documentation, we have everything we need." "For what? Divorce? Criminal charges?" "Both," he said grimly. "This is beyond civil court. What David has done is criminal. The question is whether you want to pursue criminal charges or just want him out of your life." I thought about my mother, about Sophie, about 1.5 years of my life I'd never get back. "I want him to face consequences," I said. Real ones. The toxicology report on the pills I'd saved came back detailed and damning. The independent lab Marcus hired had analyzed everything thoroughly. Pill 1, white, round. Sertraline 50 mg. This was my actual prescribed antidepressant. Legitimate. Pill 2, white, oval. Lorazepam 2 mg. A benzodiazepine. Not prescribed to me. Used for anxiety but causes sedation, cognitive impairment, and memory issues with long-term use. Pill 3, blue, small. Diphenhydramine 50 mg. An older antihistamine, the active ingredient in Benadryl. Causes drowsiness, brain fog, and in regular use can cause significant cognitive dulling. Pill 4, beige capsule. Combination of melatonin, 10 ml, and doxylamine 20 mg. Both sedatives. The melatonin alone would be fine, but in combination with everything else, it compounded the cognitive effects. The report concluded, this combination of medications, taken daily over an extended period, would produce significant and increasing cognitive impairment, memory deficits, chronic fatigue, and symptoms consistent with early dementia or severe depression. The synergistic effects of multiple sedating agents would be particularly pronounced. Marcus read it aloud to me, and with each word I felt my anger crystallize into something sharp and focused. "He researched this," I said. "David didn't just randomly grab pills. He figured out exactly what combination would make me seem incompetent without killing me or causing anything obviously wrong that a basic doctor's visit would catch." "Exactly," Marcus agreed. "This was calculated, premeditated. He knew what he was doing." "And Dr. Patterson?" "I've been investigating him. Turns out David has been Dr. Patterson's accountant for 7 years. There's a clear financial relationship there. When we depose Patterson, I'm betting we'll find he knew exactly what David was doing, possibly even helped him source the medications." "They conspired together," I said, the pieces falling into place. "David needed medical documentation of my decline for the conservatorship. Patterson provided it. In exchange, David probably helped him with something. Financial services, cooking books, who knows. But yes, this was a conspiracy." I looked at the toxicology report, this scientific proof of my husband's betrayal. "Good," I said coldly. "Then they can both face charges." Marcus filed a formal complaint with the Oregon Medical Board against Dr. Patterson, and within a week an investigator contacted me. Her name was Linda Chen, no relation to David, thankfully, and she was thorough, no nonsense, and clearly disturbed by what she was uncovering. "Dr. Patterson's records of your treatment are problematic," she said carefully, sitting in my living room while David was at work. "He documented progressive cognitive decline, increasing confusion, and what he termed possible early onset dementia, without ever ordering appropriate diagnostic tests. No MRI, no cognitive assessment, no referral to a neurologist. For a 52-year-old woman presenting with these symptoms, that's below the standard of care. He just prescribed more antidepressants, I said. Yes. And here's what's interesting. I pulled his prescription records. He never prescribed you lorazepam or diphenhydramine. So either you were obtaining those medications illegally, or someone else was giving them to you without his knowledge. Or he prescribed them under the table, I said, because he knew David would give them to me, and he wanted no official record. Linda met my eyes. That's what I suspect, but I need proof. Do you know if Dr. Patterson and your husband have any relationship outside of your medical care? David is his accountant, has been for years. Her expression shifted. That's a significant conflict of interest. Dr. Patterson should have referred you to another physician the moment cognitive issues emerged. But instead, he documented my decline to support David's conservatorship plan. That's medical fraud and conspiracy if we can prove it. I'm going to need access to all your medical records, all communications between Dr. Patterson and your husband, and I'll need to interview David. I smiled grimly. You'll have to get in line. My lawyer is building a case too. Criminal or civil? Both, I said. Definitely both. 3 months after Dr. Morrison handed me that note, I was ready. Marcus had everything documented, filed, and prepared. Dr. Morrison had provided comprehensive medical testimony. The medical board was investigating Dr. Patterson. The police had been briefed and were ready to interview David. Sophie was safely at Rachel's house for the weekend, her things already moved over for a sleepover, though she knew it might be permanent. I'd opened my own bank account and quietly moved what little money I still had access to. I'd changed my passwords to everything. I'd packed emergency bags for both Sophie and me and hidden them in Rachel's garage. Everything was in place. I woke up early that Saturday morning, the morning I'd decided would be the last morning I'd wake up next to David as his wife. He was still sleeping, breathing softly, looking peaceful and normal. How could someone who looked so ordinary be capable of such calculated cruelty? I got up, showered, dressed carefully in clothes that made me feel strong. Black pants, a blue blouse my mother had once said made me look confident. Simple jewelry. I did my makeup, fixed my hair. I wanted to look clear-eyed, competent, in control, everything he'd tried to destroy. When I came downstairs, I made coffee, set out breakfast things, arranged the table carefully. In the center, I placed a folder. Inside were copies of everything: the toxicology reports, the financial records, the emails about conservatorship, the medical board complaint, Dr. Morrison's medical summary, evidence of his crimes, neatly organized. I heard him stirring upstairs, footsteps in the bathroom, the shower running. My heart pounded, but my hands were steady as I poured coffee. David came downstairs in his weekend clothes, jeans, a pullover sweater. He smiled when he saw me. "Good morning, sweetheart. You're up early. How are you feeling?" "Clear-headed," I said, like very clear-headed. "Sit down, David. We need to talk." Something in my tone made him pause. He looked at me more carefully, noting my posture, my expression, the fact that I wasn't performing the usual morning fog. "Emma, what's going on?" "Sit. Down." He sat slowly, his eyes never leaving my face. I pushed the folder across the table to him. "Open it," I said. He did, his face paling as he read the first page, then the second, then flipped through faster, his expression cycling through shock, denial, and calculation. "Emma, I can explain." "No," I interrupted. "You can't. There's no explanation for this that makes it okay. You've been drugging me for 18 months. You've stolen my inheritance. You've ruined my credit. You've conspired to have me declared incompetent so you could legally control everything." David's face went through a remarkable transformation. The shock faded, replaced by something colder, more calculating. "You've been faking," he said slowly. "The fog, the confusion. You've been pretending this whole time." "For the last 3 months, yes. Ever since my new doctor figured out what you were doing and warned me." "Dr. Morrison," he spat. "That meddling, that hero," I corrected. She saved my life, but we're not here to talk about her. We're here to talk about what you did. And David, I want to hear you say it. I want to hear you admit out loud what you've been doing to me." He sat back, his eyes narrowing. I could see him weighing his options. Deny, deflect, attack. "You're not recording this, are you?" he asked. "I don't need to. I have months of recordings. I have medical evidence. I have bank records. I have emails, David. Emails to your lawyer about having me declared incompetent, about gaining conservatorship, about protecting the marital assets, which is a nice way of saying stealing my inheritance." His jaw tightened. "That money was in our joint account. It's marital property. That you systematically moved to accounts I had no access to while keeping me too drugged to notice or care. I was investing it, planning for our future. You were hiding it and destroying my credit to make sure if we divorced, I'd have nothing. You're being paranoid. Am I?" I leaned forward. "Then explain the pills, David. Explain why you've been giving me lorazepam and diphenhydramine that were never prescribed to me. Explain why my symptoms improved dramatically the moment I stopped taking what you were giving me." He said nothing, but I could see his mind racing. "Explain the credit cards you opened in my name," I continued relentlessly. "The $68,000 in debt I knew nothing about. Explain the journal you had Sophie keep, documenting my worst moments so you could use them against me. Everything I did was for you. Don't." My voice cracked with fury. "Don't you dare say this was for me. You poisoned me. You gaslighted me. You made me think I was losing my mind while you were actively destroying my mind. You watched me cry, watched me scared and confused, and you handed me more drugs. You enlisted my own daughter to spy on me. You planned to have me legally declared incompetent so you could control every aspect of my life. You don't understand. Then make me understand," I shouted. "Tell me why, David. Why did you do this? Was it just the money? Was that all I was worth to you? $340,000? He looked at me for a long moment, and when he spoke, his voice was cold and flat, nothing like the warm, concerned husband he'd been pretending to be. "You were never supposed to notice," he said. "If you just kept taking the pills, if you just stayed confused like you were supposed to, this would have been easy, painless. You wouldn't have even realized what was happening." "Painless?" I stared at him in disbelief. "You think what you did was painless?" "David, you stole 18 months of my life. You made me doubt my own sanity. You terrified my daughter." He shrugged, actually shrugged, like this was a minor inconvenience. "I needed the money," he said simply. "I have debts you don't know about. Business investments that went bad. I'd taken loans I couldn't repay. When your mother died and left you that inheritance, it was the solution to everything. But I knew you'd never just give it to me. You'd want to invest it wisely or save it for Sophie's college or some other nonsense. So I found another way." "You found a way to steal it." "I found a way to access what should have been ours anyway. We're married, Emma. What's yours is mine." "Not when you have to drug me and destroy my mental capacity to get it," I said. "That's not marriage, David, that's crime." I opened my laptop, which I'd placed on the table, and turned it so David could see the screen. "This is a summary of financial transactions from our joint accounts over the past 18 months, I said. $287,000 transferred to accounts in your name only. Want to explain how that's our money when I had no access to it?" He glanced at the screen, his face hardening. "This is the toxicology report on the pills you've been giving me. Independent lab analysis showing they contained medications I was never prescribed. Medications that caused the exact symptoms I was experiencing." I clicked to the next document. "This is Dr. Morrison's medical summary. It shows my dramatic improvement once I stopped taking your pills. It documents my recovery. It proves I was never actually sick, David. I was poisoned." Click. "These are the credit card statements. 7 cards in my name that I never opened. $68,000 in charges I never made. With your signatures on the applications, by the way. That's identity theft and fraud." Click. "These are the emails between you and your lawyer about conservatorship, about having me declared incompetent, about gaining legal control of the marital assets." Click. And this is the complaint filed with the Oregon Medical Board against Dr. Patterson, who conspired with you to create false medical records supporting your claim that I was declining. I closed the laptop and looked at him. You can't talk your way out of this, David. The evidence is irrefutable. You committed multiple felonies, and all of this has been filed with my attorney and copied to the police. His face had gone pale, then red, then pale again. You went to the police? He asked hoarsely. A detective is coming to interview you this afternoon. They wanted to give you a chance to make a statement. I convinced them to wait until I'd confronted you first, because I needed to hear you admit it. I needed to know why. Emma, please. Now I know, I continued. It was just money. You didn't fall out of love with me or decide you wanted a different life. You just needed cash and saw me as an easy target. Your confused, foggy wife who trusted you completely. It wasn't like that. It was exactly like that. The doorbell rang. David's head snapped toward the door, then back to me. Who is that? Detective Sarah Reeves, I said calmly. And my attorney, Marcus Nguyen. I told you they were coming. Emma, wait, please. Can't we work this out privately? I'll give back the money. All of it. We can go to counseling. I'll do whatever you want, just don't. Don't what? Don't hold you accountable? Don't make you face consequences for poisoning me, stealing from me, conspiring to have me declared incompetent? The doorbell rang again. I stood up. You're going to talk to them. You're going to make a statement, and then you're going to pack a bag and leave this house, today. Sophie and I are staying here. You're not. This is my house, too. This is the house my income helped pay for, and you're not staying in it. Marcus has already filed a restraining order. If you come near me or Sophie without permission, you'll be arrested. I walked to the door and opened it. Detective Reeves was in her 40s, professional and serious. Marcus stood beside her, briefcase in hand. Mrs. Chen, Detective Reeves said. Is Mr. Chen here? He's in the kitchen, I said, stepping aside. He's been expecting you. I watched them walk past me, heard Marcus greet David with cold professionalism. Then I walked upstairs to my bedroom, closed the door, and finally, let myself cry. Not from sadness, from relief, from freedom. That night, I slept in my house alone for the first time in 12 years. David had left after hours of interviews with the detective, his face ashen, his movements mechanical. He'd packed a bag and gone to stay with his brother as instructed by the restraining order. The house felt different without him. Bigger, quieter, mine. Sophie came home after David left. I'd texted her that it was safe, and Rachel drove her over, staying just long enough to make sure we were okay before leaving us to our first night as a family of two. Sophie and I sat on the couch, biscuit between us, and I told her everything that had happened. Is Dad going to jail? She asked, her voice small. I don't know yet, I answered honestly. The district attorney will decide whether to press charges based on what the detective found. But even if he doesn't go to jail, he's facing a lot of consequences. The medical board is investigating Dr. Patterson. The bank is investigating the fraud. And we're filing for divorce. I don't want to see him, Sophie said suddenly, fiercely. I know he's my father, but I don't want to see him. Not after what he did to you. To us. I pulled her close. You don't have to. Not until you're ready. And maybe not even then if you don't want to. Did you love him? She asked. Really love him? I thought about that. I loved who I thought he was. The David I married, the David I spent 12 years with. I loved that man. But I don't think that man really existed. I think he was always playing a role, and I just didn't see it. We cried together, grieving the family we thought we had, the father Sophie thought she knew, the husband I'd believed loved me. But later, after Sophie went to bed, I walked through the house and felt something new settling into my chest. Peace. The fog was completely gone. My mind was sharp and clear. My body felt strong. The woman in the bathroom mirror looked like me again. Tired, yes, with red eyes from crying, but present. Real. Whole. I'd taken my life back, and I was never, ever giving it away again. The legal process moved faster than I expected, probably because the evidence was so overwhelming. The district attorney did press charges. David was indicted on multiple counts: identity theft, fraud, financial exploitation, and because of the systematic drugging, assault. Dr. Patterson was charged with medical fraud and conspiracy. David's lawyer tried to negotiate, but the DA was adamant. This kind of systematic abuse, this level of premeditation, deserved serious consequences. In the end, David accepted a plea deal. He pled guilty to financial exploitation, fraud, and assault. In exchange for his cooperation and full restitution, he received a suspended sentence, 5 years of probation, which meant no jail time as long as he complied with all conditions. Those conditions were extensive. He had to return every penny he'd taken, all $287,000 of my inheritance, plus the additional $60,000 from our joint savings. He had to pay off all the credit card debt he'd accumulated in my name. He had to pay my legal fees. He had to surrender any claim to our house, our shared assets, everything. He was also required to attend mandatory counseling and was prohibited from any contact with me or Sophie except through attorneys. Dr. Patterson lost his medical license permanently and faced his own criminal charges, though those were still pending. The financial restitution hit David hard. He had to liquidate his own retirement accounts to make me whole. His debts, the ones he'd committed crimes to cover, were still his problem. His accounting firm quietly let him go when the charges became public. I heard through mutual acquaintances that he'd moved to California, to his brother's place, trying to start over. I didn't care. As long as he was away from us, he could be anywhere. Sophie struggled with it all. She was angry at David, grieving the father she thought she had, and also relieved that the strange tension in our house was finally explained and resolved. I felt crazy, she told me one night. Like I knew something was wrong but couldn't name it. I kept telling myself I was imagining things, that Dad was just being protective. But I knew. Some part of me knew. You're not crazy, I assured her. Your instincts were right. You tried to tell me to see another doctor, remember? You helped save us both. We started therapy together, both individual and family counseling. Sophie needed help processing her father's betrayal. I needed help recovering from what medical professionals were now calling intimate partner violence and coercive control. It was a long road, but at least I was walking it with a clear mind and my daughter safe beside me. Recovery wasn't linear. There were days I felt strong, vindicated, powerful. I'd reclaimed my life. I'd defeated my abuser. I was a survivor. And there were days I felt broken, ashamed, stupid. How had I not seen it? How had I let someone poison me for 18 months without knowing? What kind of fool trusts so blindly? My therapist, Dr. Linda Pacheco, was patient with these swings. Emma, you didn't let anything happen, she'd remind me gently. David deliberately created an environment where you couldn't see what he was doing. That's what gaslighting is. That's what coercive control is. He systematically undermined your reality, your judgment, your confidence, and he had help. From a medical professional who should have protected you, but instead enabled your abuse. But I should have known. Why? Because you think you should have had some magical ability to see through a carefully constructed deception by someone you loved and trusted? Emma, con artists fool intelligent people every day. Abusers manipulate their victims every day. You're not stupid or weak. You're human. You trusted your husband. That's not a character flaw. The shame was the hardest part. I felt like I should have known. Like I should have questioned more, doubted more, protected myself better. But gradually, with therapy and time and the support of people who loved me, I began to forgive myself. I learned that abuse often works because the victim loves and trusts the abuser. That's the whole mechanism, using love and trust as weapons. I learned that gaslighting is insidious precisely because it makes you doubt your own perceptions, your own sanity. I learned that healing means accepting what happened without letting it define who I am. My physical health returned completely. Without the daily sedatives and antihistamines, my energy came back. My mind sharpened, my body felt strong again. I started running in the mornings, something I'd loved before the fog but had given up when I couldn't trust my coordination. Now, I ran 3 miles every morning before Sophie woke up, feeling my muscles work, my lungs expand, my heart pump strong and healthy. My mother's inheritance, returned in full, sat in an account solely in my name. I didn't touch it at first. It felt too heavy, too contaminated by what David had done. But eventually, I used part of it to do what my mother had suggested. I started my own design firm, Emma Chen Creative, specializing in branding for small businesses and nonprofits. The rest I invested carefully, working with a financial advisor recommended by Marcus. Sophie's college fund was secure. Our future was secure, and I was in control of it all. 1 year after Dr. Morrison handed me that note, my life looked completely different. Sophie was thriving, a senior in high school now, preparing for college. She'd decided to stay close to home, at least for her first year, not because she was afraid to leave, but because she genuinely wanted to be near me. Our relationship had deepened through the trauma and healing. My business was growing. I had 15 regular clients and a waiting list. The creative work I'd lost during the fog had come back stronger, more focused, more meaningful. I'd even started dating. Cautiously, carefully, with very firm boundaries. A kind man named Peter, who ran a bookstore downtown, who moved slowly, who respected my need for independence. Nothing serious yet. Maybe it would become something. Maybe it wouldn't. For now, I was just enjoying the possibility. Dr. Morrison, Sarah, had become a friend. We met for coffee monthly, and she'd become something of a crusader for recognizing and addressing intimate partner abuse in medical contexts. "You changed my career," she told me once. "Your case made me realize how often we as doctors see the symptoms of abuse and misdiagnose them as medical or psychiatric issues. I'm teaching about this now, training other physicians to recognize the signs." "So something good came from it," I said. "A lot of good. You're helping people you'll never meet just by surviving and speaking about what happened to you." Rachel remained my rock, the friend who'd believed me, supported me, given me sanctuary when I needed it. And my mother's memory felt close. "Promise me you'll take care of yourself," she'd said. I was keeping that promise now. I gave my first public talk about my experience at a domestic violence awareness event 18 months after David left. Standing in front of 50 women, I felt nervous but determined to share what I'd learned. Not to shame myself for missing the signs, but to help others recognize them. "I want to talk about red flags," I said. "Not to blame myself for missing them, but to help you see them if they're present in your life." I listed them. Financial control disguised as care. "Let me handle the finances, honey. You don't need to worry about that." Until you have no access to your own money, no awareness of your accounts, no ability to leave. Isolation presented as protection. "You're working too hard. Why don't you quit? We don't need the money." Until you're financially dependent, professionally disconnected, and have no independent identity. Medical gaslighting. You're just stressed. You're being dramatic. It's all in your head. Until you doubt your own body, your own perceptions, your own sanity. Using others to reinforce the narrative. David had enlisted Dr. Patterson, had Sophie keep a journal of my worst moments, had positioned himself as the concerned husband to everyone we knew. It created a web of witnesses to my incompetence, the gradual nature of it all. It didn't start with drugging. It started years earlier with small things. David managing our finances, discouraging me from certain friendships, making decisions for us, without real discussion. Each thing alone seemed minor, even helpful. Together, they were a pattern of control. "The thing about abuse," I told the audience, "is that it often looks like love." David said he was taking care of me, protecting me, acting in my best interests, and because I loved him, I believe that's what he was doing. I saw women in the audience nodding, some crying quietly. "Trust your instincts," I said. "If something feels off, if you feel controlled rather than supported, if you feel like you're losing yourself, pay attention to that. You're not crazy, you're not paranoid. You might be seeing something real." After the talk, 6 women came up to me privately. 3 said they were in situations that mirrored mine. They asked for Sarah's contact information, for Marcus's name, for resources. I gave them everything I could. If my story helped even one person escape what I'd gone through, It was worth reliving it. Sarah and I met for coffee on a crisp fall morning, 2 years after that first appointment where she'd handed me the note that changed everything. We'd become real friends by then. Not just survivor and rescuer, but two women who genuinely enjoyed each other's company. I need to tell you something, Sarah said as we settled into our favorite cafe. Something I've never told you about why I gave you that note. I waited, curious. My aunt, the one I mentioned who was financially abused by her husband? She came to me for help when I was in medical school. She told me she thought something was wrong, that her husband was controlling her money, maybe drugging her. She seemed confused, disoriented, and Sarah's voice cracked. I told her she seemed stressed. I suggested therapy. I didn't believe her. Sarah. 6 months later, she had a complete mental breakdown. Her husband had her institutionalized. By the time we figured out what was happening, he'd drained her accounts and disappeared. She never really recovered. She lives in an assisted living facility now, still struggling with the psychological damage. Tears ran down Sarah's face. I was her niece, a medical student, someone she trusted, and I didn't believe her. I failed her completely. I reached across the table and took her hand. When you came into my office, Sarah continued, and I saw your symptoms, and then you mentioned your husband managing your medications and an inheritance, and that look in your eyes, that same confused, desperate look my aunt had. I knew. I just knew. And I couldn't fail again. You saved my life, I said quietly. You risked your career, your license, everything, because you believed me when you hadn't believed your aunt. I couldn't let it happen again. I couldn't live with myself if I stayed silent and you ended up like her. Your aunt would be proud of you, I said. You learned from what happened. You changed because of it. You saved me because of what you couldn't do for her. Sarah nodded, wiping her eyes. I visit her every month. I told her about you. She said to tell you congratulations on your freedom. Tell her thank you, I said. Tell her she helped save me too, even though she'll never know me. Her story mattered. If you're reading this, if you're listening to this story, and something in it sounds familiar, I want you to know some things. First, trust your body. If you're experiencing symptoms that don't make sense, that don't respond to treatment, that seem to worsen despite following medical advice, get a second opinion. Get a third if you need to. Don't let anyone, even a doctor, convince you that what you're experiencing isn't real. Second, financial awareness is self-protection. You should always, always know where your money is, what accounts exist in your name, what your credit situation is. If someone is managing your finances for you, you still need access and awareness. Love and trust don't require blindness. Third, isolation is a red flag. If someone is encouraging you to distance yourself from friends, quit your job. Rely solely on them for support and information. That's not love. That's control. Healthy relationships encourage connection, independence, growth. Fourth, document everything. If you suspect something is wrong, if you're feeling gaslit or controlled, start documenting. Keep a journal. Take screenshots, save emails, create a paper trail. If nothing is wrong, you've wasted some time. If something is wrong, you've built the evidence you'll need to protect yourself. Fifth, you're not crazy. Gaslighting works by making you doubt yourself. If you feel like you're losing your mind, if your reality doesn't match what you're being told, if you're constantly second-guessing yourself, that might not be a problem with you. That might be someone deliberately undermining your perception of reality. Sixth, get help early. Don't wait until you're in crisis. If something feels off, talk to someone. A friend, a therapist, a doctor you trust. Outside perspective can reveal patterns you can't see when you're in the middle of them. Seventh, leaving is possible. I know it doesn't always feel that way. I know you might be financially dependent or scared or convinced you can't make it alone, but there are resources. There are people who will help, and you are stronger than you think. I was 52 years old, foggy and confused, with no income and no access to my own money. I thought I was losing my mind. I thought I had no options. And I still found my way out. If I could do it, you can too. National Domestic Violence Hotline, 1-800-799-7233. They can help with emotional abuse, financial abuse, medical abuse, all of it. Call them. You deserve help. You deserve freedom. You deserve to be yourself again. I wake up at 6 a.m. on a Wednesday morning in November, 3 years after Dr. Morrison handed me that note. Sunlight streams through my bedroom window, in my house, in my life that belongs entirely to me. I get up without an alarm, my mind clear and sharp. No fog, no confusion, just me, Emma Chen, 55 years old and more myself than I've ever been. I make coffee in my quiet kitchen. No one hands me pills I haven't chosen to take. No one monitors what I eat or drink. No one asks questions designed to catalog my incompetence. I'm just free. I work for a few hours on a new client's branding project, a nonprofit supporting domestic violence survivors. They hired me specifically because of my story, because they wanted someone who understood. At noon, I have lunch with Sarah. We laugh about her terrible dating app experiences and discuss the medical conference where she'll be presenting about recognizing intimate partner abuse in clinical practice. In the afternoon, I FaceTime with Sophie, now in her second year at Portland State, studying social work. She wants to help people like I was helped. She wants to be someone's Rachel, someone's Sarah. Peter texts to confirm our dinner plans. We've been together for 6 months now, taking it slow, building something real and healthy. In the evening, I go for a run. 5 miles now, easy and strong. I come home to biscuit and a glass of wine and a book I'm actually reading and comprehending. And I think about my mother, who left me money so I could have freedom. I didn't get to use it the way she imagined, but in the end, it did give me freedom. Just not the way either of us expected. I'm okay, Mom. I say out loud to my quiet house. I'm more than okay. I'm free. And I am. So that's my story. The story of a note that said, "Don't trust your husband," and changed everything. The story of 18 months lost to fog and poison, and the 3 years since that I've spent reclaiming myself piece by piece. I don't tell you this story to scare you, or to make you suspicious of everyone you love. Most marriages don't end this way. Most partners don't spend a year and a half systematically destroying their spouse's mind to steal an inheritance. But some do. And if you're listening to this and something resonates, if you've been feeling foggy, confused, isolated, controlled, I want you to know that you're not imagining it. You're not crazy, and you don't have to live that way. Trust your instincts, seek second opinions, document everything. Talk to someone who isn't in your abuser's circle of influence. And remember that the fog can lift. The confusion can clear. You can find your way back to yourself, even when it seems impossible. I did, and I'm not special or particularly brave or unusually strong. I'm just a woman who got lucky. Lucky that one doctor was willing to risk her career to hand me a note. Lucky that I had friends who believed me. Lucky that I had the resources and support to build a case and escape. Not everyone has that luck. That's why I'm telling this story. So if you need that note, that warning, that validation, that permission to trust what you're feeling, here it is. If something feels wrong, it probably is. If you feel like you're losing yourself, you might be. If someone says they're helping you, but you keep getting worse, look closer at what they're really doing. You deserve to wake up clear-headed in a life that belongs to you. You deserve safety, agency, freedom. You deserve to be yourself. And if you've lost that person somewhere along the way, in the fog, in the confusion, in the systematic undermining of your reality, you can find her again. I promise you, I found me. You can find you too. Thank you for listening to my story. I hope it helps someone who needs it. I hope it saves someone, the way Dr. Morrison saved me. And I hope that wherever you are, whatever you're facing, you remember the fog can lift, the truth can emerge, and freedom, real freedom, is worth fighting for. Take care of yourself. You're worth it.